I'm pretty sure it's required by law, not just one of the laws we humans dreamt up, but a fundamental, immutable law of the universe, that when doing a video essay involving computer technology, you have to insert stock footage of ones and zeros floating through space. So here you go, the foundations of digital cosmology, the irreducible bits of information we call binary code. In the previous video in this series, we started with the iconic affordance of the save icon and ended up talking about consciousness and Plato. Bjork was there. And at the end of that video, I said we were going to use Neoplatonism as the jumping off point for this video. But I changed my mind. We're going to push that out to the latter half of this video and stick with computing just a little longer. A binary system of communication can be useful if you only have a two-state system to communicate with, like an array of lights or switches turning on or off. Basic true or false logic. And more complex binary systems were created in the 16th and 17th centuries, but it was this dandy fop, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who took it to another level. Leibniz was a German polymath genius in basically every field of study that was available in his time. He invented a calculator called the stepped reckoner with a user interface consisting of a rod and a wheel. That didn't use binary though. 20-something years after the stepped reckoner, it's 1690-something, Leibniz gets really interested in this base 2 system, and he finds a way to use binary to make calculations and represent complex logical operations, thus laying the groundwork for modern computer science. None of the computing technology we use today would work in the way it does without Leibniz. Transistors, microprocessors, pixels, ASCII, the qubits of quantum computing, all based on binary logic. He also invented the base 2 positional numbering system still in use today. Just for fun, here's a quick rundown of how to represent any number in binary. We most commonly use the base 10 positional number system, where you start with the ones place on the far right of a number and then multiply everything by a factor of 10 as you move to the left. Tens place, hundreds place, thousands, etc. A base 2 numbering system also starts with the ones place at the far right, but as you move left, you multiply everything by a factor of 2. So you have a 2's place, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. Now imagine there's a switch above each of these numbers, and you turn the number below it on with the number 1 and off with the number 0. So if you wanted to represent a number, say 23, you'd start by turning on the highest number below 23, which is 16. And you keep going to the right, turning on numbers without going over 23. For example, if you turned on the 8 number, you'd get 24 and bust out, so we leave that slot turned off. So 23 in binary is 10111. By the way, each slot that requires a logic check of on, off, or yes, no, that's 1 bit. So 23 in binary code is a 5-bit number because it takes 5 binary checks to register it. Anyway, you can build simple calculators and processing systems using a startlingly small number of bits. Like people use arrays of on-off switches in Minecraft to build calculators and basic computers within the game. I'll say that again. There are people building working computers within Minecraft using the physics and the rules of Minecraft. Back to Leibniz, though. Leibniz was also a philosopher, and after playing around with binary for a few years and seeing what it could do, he came to think of it as a representation of the fundamental engine of creation. At its most primordial level, binary echoes the duality of being and non-being, represented by 0 and 1, void and creation. Now, because he was a Christian, he framed this as a way to demonstrate mathematically how God pulled creation out of nothingness. In the very beginning of the Bible, the first thing God does as an act of creation is to create these binaries. He starts separating things, creating layers of differentiation.
And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so.
Having introduced the concept of ontology in the previous video, I'll now refer to this sort of increase in a model's complexity as an increase in its ontological resolution. Now, I don't know whether Leibniz actually broke the Book of Genesis down in this exact way. I'm just illustrating how binary modeling could be applied to the act of creation. But we do know that a missionary friend of his came back from China and he brought with him a bunch of information about Chinese culture and philosophy. This was one of the few things about the world with which Leibniz was unfamiliar, and he soaked it in. And eventually, Leibniz, through correspondence, tried to convince the Emperor of China to convert to Christianity using binary as an argument. And he thought the emperor could be persuaded by this because one of the foundations of Chinese philosophy is a system called the I Ching. So let's talk about the I Ching and the binary system. The I Ching is the Book of Changes. It's so ancient that it can't be traced back to a specific source. It predates Taoism and Confucianism and Feng Shui. It's even older than the yin-yang symbol. The I Ching is based on another type of binary system where the ones and zeros are represented by solid lines and broken lines, which in turn represent force and receptivity. And the interplay between these polarities is what allows the I Ching to model life, the universe, and everything, to a certain degree of ontological resolution, that is. So let's break down the I Ching's binary system. You start with 8 trigrams. These represent the 8 different permutations or states you can get if you combine 3 broken and solid lines. Each of these trigrams correlates to the basic elements of earth, wind, fire, and water, as well as their more complex elemental extensions, mountain, sky, thunder, and lake. When you combine 2 trigrams, you get a hexagram, and that hexagram is sort of a synthesis between the upper and lower trigrams that make it up. For example, take the trigram of heaven, represented by 3 solid lines, or you could say 3 bits that are all in the on position. Take that and place it on top. Then place the trigram for earth, represented by 3 broken lines, or 3 bits in the off position, and you get hexagram number 11, which is called flow. And the meaning of the flow hexagram suggests that when heaven is over earth, where it should be, the creative force flows freely and harmoniously. Now reverse those 2 trigrams and you get hexagram 12, which is called obstruction, representing blocked or stagnant energy. Because the world is upside down, it's out of harmony, and so things can't properly flow. Conveying this much information in 6 bits is why the I Ching has lasted for thousands of years. It's an extremely elegant system. Each hexagram in the I Ching is assigned a meaning or a phrase, and hexagram 1 is called creation or force, and then it goes on to number 2, openness or receptivity, and of course these represent masculine and feminine energies or yang and yin. The third hexagram is birth or sprouting, so you have a natural progression with male, female, baby, and the next one is youth, and so on through the rest until we get to hexagram 64, which is called toward the end or before completion. There is no hexagram for completion. We never get there with the I Ching. That's why it's the Book of Changes. The universe is always in a state of change. There is no end. There's not even a beginning. The first hexagram isn't beginning. It's just pure creative energy or force. And this is probably why the emperor didn't buy it when Leibniz tried to map Christianity onto the I Ching. It's not fluid enough or cyclical enough to transpose the former onto the latter. Christianity takes the first bit of light and dark and sort of snaps everything else into that binary alignment. God and Satan, Alpha and Omega, beginning and end, good and evil, heaven and hell, it's just dichotomies all the way down. As far as the 3-bit trigrams go, the I Ching of course isn't a cosmology where the universe is literally made out of thunder and mountains and water. These are representations of the raw basic energies that combine in various ways to create complexity. A great way to internalize this is by playing one of those alchemy games on your phone where you start with earth, fire, air, and water and combine those into new materials, then combine those materials into more complex items and basically build the universe. If you do this backward, if you examine everything we see and do and feel and strip it down layer by layer, deeper and deeper, you get progressively more elemental. Which brings us back to Plato. Most religious Greeks at the time of Plato thought of the gods as actual entities, similar to humans but much more powerful. But Plato thought they were missing the point. He said, no, the gods are just shadows of a deeper reality. Behind them are the true forms or raw elemental energies that these gods are manifestations of. Many centuries later, Carl Jung would come along and call these forms archetypes. So for example, in this Platonic realm of forms, let's say there's a Platonic idea of a pine tree, the perfect pine tree, and that idea exists in the realm of forms as a kind of scaffolding. And all the pine trees in our world will follow the basic blueprint of a pine tree, but they do it imperfectly. There's a loss of perfection that occurs during physical manifestation. But all pine trees are striving toward this perfect pine tree form, or what we would call the ideal pine tree. But if you take Plato's world of forms and keep expanding on it beyond his system of thought, you can get to a place where the pine tree form itself is an echo of a more basic, more elemental form that we would just call a tree. So the pine tree is built around the scaffolding of treeness, and behind treeness is a scaffolding of some deeper principle, like growth. And these nested forms go deeper and deeper until you get down to pure being. This is the core idea of emanationism, where you have a pure source and every bit you add to the source adds more complexity. So the source is nested within these more complex realms, and every layer of emanation is just like a layer of differentiation in binary code. Different philosophical groups ran with this in different directions. There was a group called the Gnostics who took this to mean that each ring of this concentric circle was worse than the more central ring that preceded it. So you have reality degrading in integrity as it emanates further from the source. By the time you get to the reality in which you're watching this video on YouTube created by the gooey meat sack that is me, you're in one of the lowest rungs there is. All of us stuck on this plane of existence are in a fallen state. And they illustrate this with an elaborate cosmology that assigns names to all of these things. The source of being is the monad, and the monad emanates all of these aeons, and the male and female aeons pair up and emanate their own children, and so on. There are a lot of different flavors of Gnosticism, but they pretty much all agree that to live in a world of matter is to live in a fallen state. And they marry this with Christianity, which gives the entire Bible a completely different meaning, like the serpent is actually a force of wisdom and liberation. And salvation is all about using this wisdom to elevate yourself into this elemental realm to try to get back to the source. But a less dark interpretation was that all the outward emanations were good, because a divine tree produces good fruit. And the process of emanation is just how the source apprehends itself. Everything is just an expression of the one true, good, and beautiful thing that we might call God. So this is the general principle behind what we call today Neoplatonism. It's also the general principle behind the phrase, as above, so below, which comes from the emerald tablet that spells out a philosophy rooted in Neoplatonism that we call Hermeticism. And here is where we'll leave this video. In the next one, we'll get deeper into Hermeticism and look at some of the traces it's left behind in our culture. Elements are extremely important in Hermeticism, so it's a natural extension of this video. But for now, I thank you all for following along with this series. We're a long way from where we started, but I did tell you in the very beginning that we were headed in this direction. I hope you've enjoyed the ride so far. If you did, please remember to use the digital echo of your thumb to show the algorithm some love and help this channel grow. May the creative force of pure being lay its blessing upon you all.